Welcome to the Great Basin Seasonal Outlook for March through June. Over the last 30 days, we've seen temperatures generally above normal across much of the Great Basin. The only exceptions are parts of central and eastern Idaho into Wyoming and down across eastern Utah, where temperatures have been just below normal. This is also the area of the Great Basin that has been seeing much of the precipitation. Over the last month, we've seen above normal precipitation over, again, central and eastern Idaho into Wyoming, and then further south into parts of central Utah, we've seen near normal precipitation in some spots of the higher terrain. But largely, the southern two-thirds of the Great Basin has been well below normal, especially over western Nevada into the Sierra and California. Looking at the precipitation since October 2019, the beginning of the water year, and most of the Great Basin we're seeing below normal precipitation. Only very small parts of the north and over the far south are above normal. This area in the far south is due to precipitation we saw back in November and December. However, it's been very dry since then. Currently looking at our snowpack, we do have generally near normal snowpack across many of the higher terrain of the Great Basin. The only exception is over western Nevada into the Sierra, where precipitation has been low, so snowpack is below normal and well below normal in some spots. Soil moisture again reflects that. The driest conditions are over western Nevada into California. However, we do have some drier areas over parts of Utah still that have been dry recently. Looking at the evaporative demand drought index, no significant areas of drought across the Great Basin over the last month due to precipitation, just some drier spots in the south and west, but we do have a fairly good dry area of ED4 over parts of northern California. However, looking at the overall drought monitor, we still have some long-term drought to deal with over parts of Utah, so some generally moderate drought across Utah with some severe drought down into northern Arizona, and then some drier spots of Idaho into western Nevada as well. We'll likely see the drought continue over parts of Utah and the Arizona Strip for the time being, and we may see some drought develop into parts of the Sierra and into western Nevada. 10-hour fuel moistures, again with the dry conditions we've seen across Nevada, are below the 3 to 5th percentile over parts of central and southern Nevada, and much higher as you go further east and north. Similar conditions observed in the 100-hour fuel moisture with the driest conditions out across Nevada, and 1,000-hour fuel moistures as well. We do have a fairly dry pocket over southern Nevada for 1,000-hour fuel moistures, so some areas down near the Spring Mountains and areas that have been very dry recently with, again, the low snowpack that we've seen. We could have some potential for increased fire potential as we get later into the spring towards the summer in the higher elevations, depending on the amount of precip we see over the next couple of months. We still do have plenty of grass across the Great Basin. We haven't had much new growth this year, again with conditions being on the drier side. However, we do have a still above normal grass crop over much of Nevada into western Utah and far above normal over parts of central and southern areas. And this is from what we saw in the winter of 2018 into 2019. So we will have some carryover fuels, as any of the precipitation we've seen this year has not been low elevation snowpack to compact the fuels, so we'll at least have some of the carryover fuels going into this fire season. So now that we've looked at what has been recently happening, we'll go a little bit further and look at some of the outlook. First, looking at El Nino and La Nina. We have been in a state of neutral for some time, and that's the area shaded or that is in the white area here. So as you can see, going forward over the next several months into the later portion of the summer, we'll likely still stay in this neutral category. However, sea surface temperatures look like they will be decreasing, so we will see if we go into any type of La Nina later in the fall. But right now it looks like we will see some cooling, but still stay in that neutral category. So looking at some of the outlooks, taking us to the 8 to 14 day outlook from March 2nd to March 8th. You can see generally warm and dry conditions over western areas of the Great Basin. However, we will see cold fronts dip a little bit further south going into the first 2 weeks in March. So we will see some precipitation finally making it into the southern areas of the Great Basin that so desperately need it. Looking at through the rest of the month of March, we may tend to see some drier and warmer conditions, but again, cold fronts will drop down, bringing those cooler temperatures and precipitation throughout at least the first 2 or 3 weeks. Looking at the next 4 months, again after we move through March and we head towards April, we might actually see a wetter pattern start to emerge from April and possibly lingering over western areas into May. Also, temperatures will remain generally warm, so we're looking at more lower elevation rainfall, no significant snowfall, so we likely will not be expecting any compaction of our fine fuels in much of the lower elevations this year. So depending on how much moisture we see in April and May will determine how much of a new growth we see and where that's located. but we'll certainly be looking across areas of Nevada and Utah into southern Idaho and watching that rainfall and watching the fine fuel growth as we head into fire season. Temperatures may start cooling through May and June, especially in the north and west. We may still see some precipitation lingering in the northwest towards June, but we will start to likely see some drier signatures develop as we move towards at least the early part of June, late May into early June. So again, we'll continue watching this. Right now it's looking like our biggest concern is watching the fine fuel growth and then watching the weather pattern as we head into May and June. Again, this is from the Climate Prediction Center, the 3-month average from April through June, not really showing any of the finer details each month, but on average we might be warmer and drier. But again, we're still looking for at least some periods to be on the wetter side. So putting everything together shows generally we're looking for normal conditions from March through June across the Great Basin. So that means minimal fire activity through March and April. And as we head into May, we will start to see some of that fire activity pick up, which would be normal for the time of year. Again, we'll be watching the fine fuel growth, especially as we move through April and May. And we may have some areas of above normal in the fine fuels across Nevada and Utah, depending on the growth. And also we'll be watching the southern areas of the Great Basin in those higher terrain or in some of the PJ areas. Again, if we see those conditions stay mostly dry, we might have an increase in fire potential in some of those fuels heading towards May and June. That concludes our webcast for this month. Check back next month for the latest updates.